Direct the Atlas, and welcome to the Atlas Speaker Series. This is our sixth event of distinguished speakers from around the country and world. Today our guest is Sheldon. But before I introduce him, I want to thank the sponsors of the Atlas, Haral, Pepperton, and Anant Haral. They have made it possible for us to invite distinguished folks. So, Lee Sheldon is the Associate Professor and Co-Director of the Games and Simulation Arts Program at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. He also leads a team building an emergent reality lab at RPI, which is an augmented reality space for research and education.
I have some first pictures.
Oh, cool. And Lee is an author, perhaps an author before professor. Many of you may have maybe reading his newest book, The Multiplayer Classroom, Designing Coursework as a Game. Some of us have attempted to emulate these practices in our classrooms. But before his career in video games, Lee wrote and produced over 200 popular television shows, including Star Trek, The Next Generation, and Charlie's Angels. I won't hold that against you. He began his academic career at Indiana University teaching game design and screenwriting. It was at IU that he first instituted the practice of designing classes as multiplayer games. Since that time, Lee has written several commercial games that are successful and has consulted on a zillion others, I suspect. He continues to be active in the space and is working on, actually just completed an alternative reality game teaching Mandarin and Chinese culture, which you should sign up for, perhaps. Anyway, please join me in welcoming Lee Sheldon.
Thank you, John. I wrote this book because I was getting tired of talking about this topic, and now I find myself talking about it even more, but that's okay. I sort of backed into this idea by accident because I was getting bored teaching after only about a year. I'm only in my 5th year now. And I thought, well, this is stupid. How can I make the classroom more engaging for me? You know, forget the students. And then I thought, well, gee, what do you do for a living? You design games. I wonder if you could actually design the classroom as a game. And that's what led me down this long and rocky road to Boulder. Yeah, that works. Okay, so I'm going to get in here because I have a lot of slides. I don't use notes, so if I used a terminology you may not know from gaming, because I am a gamer, just kind of, I may not see you if you look puzzled, so go, huh? Or something like that. Just try, huh? Try it, huh? Okay, good. And then I will try desperately to define terms that are undefinable. So first of all, I got to make it clear that I'm not a researcher or a scientist like these people. I am also not really an academic. I only play one on TV or telepresence. And what I am is a storyteller. And whatever career I've had, and I've had several, starting out in theater, then in television, and then in games, and now teaching most of those, I've always been a storyteller first. I am a writer first. I was a writer-producer in Hollywood. I am a writer-designer and sometimes producer in games. I work on both commercial and serious games. I worked for Zynga last year. You can ask me about that horrific experience. And I'm working now on a wonderful game with Harmonix, who have discovered narrative, and we're telling story in a brand new way, and we're using the Kinect as it has not been used before. So we're having a great time doing that, and hopefully we'll be allowed to as we show off our vertical slice in about 2 weeks to the publisher. So hopefully that will go well. I start this story where a lot of us started, and that is with play. And we all know, I'm not going to go into all the details on all these things, but we know that animals learn to survive through play. So do kids, although that group over there I'm not too sure about. But it is instilled in us as a species, just like it is in all those others. And when we start out in education, we start out playing. Kindergarten, pre-kindergarten, nursery school, and we are captivated by this, and we learn how to play with blocks and other people and all sorts of things. But then something happens as we start up through the various grades. We start running into other people who are teaching us in an entirely different way. And that's not to say that some of these people aren't pretty cool. If you're ever stranded on an island, the professor can just do anything you need. He can make it out of coconuts. All right? It's very handy. But you can also run into professors that it may come back to haunt you, and it's an entirely different tradition than what we started out with. Anyone born from about 1975 on is of the video game generation, whether they like it or not. I am of the TV generation. They are of the video game generation, even if they don't play video games. We now have that horrific thing called gamification, which this has been compared to, but I swear that I was doing this before Jesse talked about gamification at that conference and got everybody using that stupid word. And we've asked this question over and over again, right, as instructors. Wow, look at that. Look what they're doing with that game. I've been asked this over and over again. I am a gamer myself. I finished Skyrim right around Christmas, and I'm now level 49 in Old Republic. Those are both multiplayer games because Skyrim's not a multiplayer game, but they're RPGs, and I really like RPGs. I have to admit that I'm not as happy with shooters, although I play them, and there's some I like. Assassin's Creed, whether it's really a shooter or not, is one of my faves. I like Uncharted. I mean, there are games that are action games that I like, but I'm basically an elf and dwarf kind of guy at heart. So we ask this question over and over and over again. How do we can get them to focus like that in class? Well, maybe with video games. This is not my idea. People have been trying to do this for a long time. We've had video games in the classroom for decades. Exciting games. They've done research that proved these games are better than people standing up here and talking to you, that the students pay more attention. But anything is better than this. And there is not really a lot right now of quality control going on in games that are being shoved into the classroom to save all of our lives. One of the things that they seem to miss when they're doing this, Math Blaster, my God, you shoot things to add, is abstraction. They are way too literal about what they're doing. This is an idea of an abstraction, and you know exactly what's going on there. This is one of the first driving games. You don't need sensational graphics to figure out that this is a car and it's moving down that road. Well, maybe you do if it's a static image, but that is a car, and it's moving down a road with lighted poles, which we see on all our roads at night. But that up until now, everybody's been being way too literal. They take a math game, and what do? They make you add and subtract in a math game. Oh, good. Okay, this is very important that we have interaction with our audience. Here he is. Where did the idea of the multiplayer classroom come from? I'm not saying that there are a bunch of orcs sitting out there right now in Boulder. What I am saying, this was a graphic that one of the people who reviewed multiplayer classroom did, and I kind of liked that, so I stuck him in there. Forgive me, it's not intended to indicate my audience in real life in any way. So one idea was once, and I thought I'm going to try to have some fun with this, and I hope they will too, is what can we take from video games? Well, from solo games, we get immersion. We saw those two kids with their controllers. Engagement, they're liking what they're doing. We've got concepts like experience points, leveling, learning by failure, and of course, Fat loot. Very important.
What's that?
Ha-ha! Fat loot is the stuff you get when you do something, when you complete a quest, when you kill a mob. Mob being a mobile, as it was originally called, which is basically anything that moves, but in this case, anything that moves that you either shoot or stab or beat up on. And you can get gold, you can get platinum, you can get really cool armor that'll actually help you. You can get swords, so the next one you kill is a little bit easier. Fat loot is really, really good stuff. Okay. A second idea, well, I like multiplayer games and virtual worlds. What do they have that solo games don't? They have competition. They have collaboration in their boss raids. Boss raids, very important. They have the concept of zones, where people move from space to space, something we usually don't allow in our classrooms. They have the concept of pickup groups and guilds. A guild is a group of like-minded people who get together to play a game in the way that they all like. So we have some that want to role play. They're few and far between. We have raider guilds who are there really just to get the fat loot. And we have pickup groups, which are a coin toss, whether that's going to be a fun experience or not. You will discover that in multiplayer games, pickup groups they're the people who you don't know, but you got to go out and kill this thing and you need help. And you really don't want to find a cleric or a priest from eBay. Because they bought that one and they don't know what they're doing and you're going to die. Okay? Pickup groups are a little dicey. And last, community. Very important. The idea in multiplayer games of community keeps people playing more than the fact that the game mechanics get pretty old and in Old Republic right now, I know exactly what's going to happen in every encounter. Well, I'm a level 49, so I'm getting near the top is 50, so I'm pretty close. Okay, so multiplayer games. Here are a couple of examples. This is one I actually worked on at IU. It's called Quest Atlantis. It is, I think it's still running for middle school kids to teach them about the environment, about activist engagement, activist not being a bad word in this case, but actually getting involved in the world around you. This is from Second Life, which I consider, it's not a game, and I'm not sure it's a social network. I think it's more of a con job. Because when all my friends who are researchers ran into Second Life to find all these millions of people they said were there so that they could do their research in Second Life, they ended up researching other researchers, which is not a segment of the population that is the equivalent of anybody who's really out there in the real world. So it didn't really work for them. And I want to show you something else. This is from WoW, World of Warcraft. This is a multiplayer game. I want you to look at the screens and what you have to take in if you're playing Quest Atlantis or hanging out in Second Life. This, I think, is a healer, because healers usually, it takes up most of the screen. This is a boss raid, and they can barely see what's going on because they have to keep all the other people alive. They have to know what spells are going on. They have to know how much mana people have left, how much health. And these are all things which they process because they want to in real time while they're talking through Ventrilo or TeamSpeak or something like that. And they're getting instructions. They're talking also in text. And people do this for fun. That's a good multiplayer game. Quest Atlantis did not engage me, and I worked on it. A third idea, alternate reality games. How many people do not know what alternate reality games are? Oh, good. Okay. They take place in the real time and real world. The game platform is this. And they can be on the internet. We make up fake websites. The games that sort of got under in people's consciousness first that were alternate reality games were one called The Beast, which was a viral advertising campaign for Steven Spielberg's movie AI. It did better than Steven Spielberg's movie AI, which I've now seen later, and I think it was harshly judged. I actually think it's got some pretty cool things in it. There was another one called I Love Bees, which was a viral advertising campaign for Halo 2. Halo 2 is a video game. I've worked with these. These are some pictures from an alternate reality game I ran on a grant for Robert Wood Johnson. And this is a student who didn't do very well. If you can get students to crawl into sewers playing your game, they are engaged. They're crazy, but they are engaged. That guy, we did what we call sprints. They were geocaching, which means something was hidden out there, and they were in teams. They had to run and try and find it first. Unfortunately for him, the thing that he was looking for, which was a clue, was on that rock. But he didn't know that because they were gone by then. He had crawled all the way inside and got really dirty. This was a health and fitness game. It was to test the efficacy of using gameplay to make people healthier and fitter without teaching them anything about food pyramids or anything else. And it involved a missing professor at IU. It involved earthquakes that were threatening to level the town of Bloomington, Indiana. And they ran all over campus and the city for 8 weeks. And we tested them at the beginning, we tested them at the end, and they were healthier and fitter, trying to find a missing professor, dealing with a flying saucer landing in the middle of IU's football field, and a bunch of other things that had nothing to do with health and fitness. Collateral learning, which really surprised us. I love when emergent behavior occurs in a game. That means that something the designer did not plan on occurs. And in this case, they discovered they could walk across, IU is a huge campus, much like this. They could walk across campus faster than taking the bus or waiting at a bus stop. And as a result, they got to sleep in later, and they still made it to class on time, and they got exercise. I had a great time doing this. Believe me, it is a challenge designing games when it could rain on you. I mean, all sorts of things can happen here. I don't have time to go into them all, but I did do another version of this for Coca-Cola, which had executives from North Africa going through the same thing they went through in 8 weeks in 2.5 days for team building and to learn technology and so on. I asked, they're from North Africa, if there's anything cultural I should know about these people, anything that we should change in the game? No, they're Coke executives, they're sophisticated. And I bought that. And then we had one sprint where there's a composer named Hoagie Carmichael who is from Bloomington, and he's buried there. And the teams had to put flowers on his, roses on his grave, and they had to run across town once they figured out where his grave was. And these guys got cabs. Because they could, and they were sophisticated. Okay, game boards. These are the classrooms that I've taught the multiplayer classroom in. That was the first one. That was at IU. Very old-fashioned looking, but actually the most flexible of all of them, because those chairs can be moved in any place you want. You can create zones, guilds who can sit together, and so on. This one was also at IU, obviously more sophisticated and a little bit more difficult because these things were very heavy. These, because they're even more sophisticated, this is at RPI, they're the outlets come up out of the floor into the middle of a table. That's great, but you can't move any of the tables, which was an issue. But it didn't stop us from breaking a few during one of the classes. Okay, I start the multiplayer classroom with this greeting. This is often the reaction. But then I say, and they don't just go, ah, now I get it. It's a challenge. And everybody gets the challenge. Oh yeah? Prove it. This was a class, a syllabus for the class. I want to show you a couple things to look at. My old syllabus for this class just talked about, you know, I'm going to be doing this, I'm going to be doing that. Things are changed. There's now guilds. We're going to be crafting things. There's a level chart, which in this first iteration of the game, I actually put how it mapped to grades. I eventually took that out because they were no longer interested in the grades. And if they wanted to find them, they could find them someplace else. What else we got? Crafting. Defeat a level boss. I'll get to that a little bit later. Solo camping, text editing in this case. Solo camping, anybody need to know what that is, right? Yeah, okay. If you're camping something or farming it, they're slightly different, but if you're camping, it means you're waiting for a mob to respawn over and over and over again because they drop fat loot. And farming is when you deliberately find a mob that is way below you in level, so you can kill it over and over and over again, so you can collect enough gold that you can sell it on eBay. All right? The text that we chose, which was... Oh, actually, it isn't in this one. So what am I doing? This one was actually not too bad. We did one that was for another design class that had so many mistakes in it. It was written by people for whom English was a second language, which is fine, but it was never edited. It was, I think, called Understanding Video Games. They made egregious errors, typos, they got history wrong about video games, and it was really easy to farm them. And people got extra XP for that. Down here, we had a peer review because we divide people into guilds and they work on projects. This game was a project-based game. And we allowed them to judge the performance anonymously of the other people in the guild. And Leroy Jenkins, how many people have heard that awful name before? All right. For those of you who haven't, I'm pretty sure this is an apocryphal story. I think it was a setup. But back at that boss raid, the entire guild, this was a 40-person boss raid, we're about to take on one of the major bosses in WoW. And Leroy was getting really impatient, if I remember, and then he left for some time while they were going through all the strategy and tactics, which can take an hour or more to go through on the spot. And this is after everybody has already talked about it. All right? Leroy comes back and everybody's still standing around. I think his avatar didn't move. Let's make that clear. He went to the bathroom or to get a sandwich or something. He comes back. He's still bored, so he screams out his name and attacks the boss mob. The entire raid wiped. This is not going to get you any points in a guild. As a matter of fact, if you show up in a pickup group, hopefully they're aware of what you're doing. This is a bad thing to get everybody killed. A wipe means everybody was killed, like in wiped out. Okay, some of the things that we've tried and that seem to be working pretty good is having the students create avatars. Here I have some, and then present them to the class. That gives them an investment in what's going to happen. I did have some issues with avatars that I talked about earlier to a class, but in general, they had a really good time. Again, if you can get them to crawl into sewers, if you can get them to turn cartwheels in class, that's a good thing. Actually, that's how one of the tables got broke, but that's a whole another issue. Students teaching students is another concept where they presented almost all the material in the class, either as solo quests or as guild quests, where the entire guild presented the material. Up here, they're using Minecraft, which is a really cool game. How many people played Minecraft, right? It's very cool. And you also can make it do anything you want, practically, as long as it's square, and to teach with. It's really helpful. But this guy was great with card tricks. And so he presented his solo quest illustrating principles with card tricks. I had another student who wrote an epic poem to describe game design principles. Learning by failing is really important. This is a wipe. This is a wipe. I think that's the Lich King up there, right? And Lich King is a, I can't say that in public. He's really bad. And wiping is what you expect. In a boss raid, you learn by trying over and over and over again. What happens in a regular classroom? You got an F, sorry. That's it. I allow my students to retake exams. I don't change any of the questions because they learn. Grading by attrition, another really important concept. Here I've gotten a little bit better with my leveling system. These skills actually, these were, if you got to this was for tracking attendance. If you had perfect attendance up to here, you got 5 extra XP. I gave them XP simply for coming to class. XP, experience points. It's how you determine how you level up in a video game. Not all of them, but most of the ones, certainly the ones with dwarves and elves in them. A problem that I had with the grading system is, in this one, in order to pass the, you notice it doesn't say A through F anymore, but in order to pass the class, you had to be at least level 10. That's a D minus. And they could figure that out by doing the math, because I gave them, I'd say there's 1,000 points you can get throughout this class. And then there were extra credits, so they could even go over. Intrinsic rewards. One of the reasons why I hate gamification, and I hate being lumped into that, is because there are a lot of people out there gaming everything. This started with, like mileage points just for flying on a plane, right? And now everything's gaming. If you haven't seen it, I recommend Jesse Schell's talk that he gave at DICE. It was picked up by TED when he talked about gamifying brushing your teeth and all sorts of other things. And he really laid out the problem with this, which is plenty of research that apparently none of these people have read that says giving people badges may work for a while, but it actually can make them less likely to learn once the badges are removed. There's research that says this. We need intrinsic rewards too. So in the classroom, this is part of a midterm prep. Somebody did something right. He's getting a high five from one of his guildies. On my midterm exam, I have 40 questions and then 10 more, where those last 10, if anyone in the guild gets the question correctly, they all get credit for it. And as a result, you get a lot of pats on the back for doing that, because you're doing it for your guild. It's like when a meat shield, when it's a tank, when it's the big bulky guy with all the hit points stands in front of the pitiful mage who's shooting the fireballs and gets knocked down by the dragon because the healer was back there and couldn't keep track of all those people, and he's dead. He's taken one for the team. He's going to have to pay extra to get his armor fixed and so on. This is doing something for the team. It's exactly the same kind of thing. It's an intrinsic reward. It's absolutely important. Boss raids. This is a game design class. And in that class, people have to design games. Here is a member of one team on a boss raid. Why is it a boss raid? Because she's pitching to these two guys here. I bring in people from outside who are actually game designers. That's Jesse Schell. That's Chris Foster at Harmonix. I'm now working with Chris on a game. They play, they don't have to play, they are in the commercial game industry. Jesse is, even though he's also another one pretending to be an academic at Carnegie Mellon. And they're worse than Simon Cowell. These people that I bring in. Simon Cowell, anybody need to know who Simon Cowell is? Okay, great. Not a gaming term, or a Leroy Jenkins. He's kind of a Leroy Jenkins. They are really tough on them because I believe that the students need to face the reality of the industry they think they may want to go into. And it's very important that they meet these bosses up front and fail with them so that later on they might learn to be better at it. This is guild versus guild PvP, player versus player, midterm prep. That's one person from each guild. They're headed for the hat of knowledge here. Whoever gets there first gets to answer a question from the game master. We also broke a table doing this, as you can imagine. Our midterm preps are competitive. They are incredibly engaging. It is exactly like a multiplayer experience online. There's trash talking. Trash talking, that's where you're making fun of your opponent, let's say, and saying how great you are. And this particular one had physical action in it as well, and I've done that with several different things. Classrooms aren't always the best for that, but it worked quite well. You will find emergent game behavior when you design a competition like this, and I'll give you a couple of examples. Yeah.
Did they get to choose who went up for this?
Yeah. Actually, the volunteers, and if somebody didn't do very well, they got taken back by the guild really fast and replaced by somebody who was a little bit swifter. One of them was basically an open book prep, where I would read a question. They could find it in the book, and whoever found it first yelled out. We didn't have buzzers. I think we should have buzzers, but they yelled out something. And I knew, and so they then had to close the book and answer the question. Okay, pretty easy when the question is, who designed Mud 1? Richard Bartle. Okay. Later in the competition, the competition was really fierce, but later in the competition, the question started to be, name the 8 things that do this. Closed the book, got the first one, maybe got the second one, and then they were out, and then somebody else got to go. So the first guild that broke out of that, they would find it, and the guy would hold it up, and everybody else in the guild would read off part of the answer. That was the first stage of emergent game behavior. The next one was the people that started to beat them was they would just find it and write it down. I think it was the other way around. They wrote it down, and then the guys who showed everybody were faster than them. So they started to win extra points. The team that won used a cell phone, a smartphone, to photograph the page the answer was on, and then in their leisure to read it. They got accused of cheating, but it is not cheating. It is emergent game behavior. They're learning about the subject matter by doing the midterm prep. Another one, they metagamed me, where they could all get 25 XP if they came in first, 20, 15, 10, and 0. And the 2 guilds that were ahead started deliberately, after discussion, open discussion in the classroom, started deliberately not winning. And they did all the math, and they figured out how all guilds could get 25 points. And that is, they were so pleased with themselves. But that's what I want to see. I want to see that emergent game behavior. How did they do on that particular exam? The average grade for that exam was an A. I didn't even put that in the book because I didn't think people would believe me. That is playing a game to prepare for an exam. And then remember, the exam also had those 10 questions of where anyone in the guild could answer it and everybody would get it correct. Aha. Some of you were thinking that, right? these are the places where up until the book was published, we have done multiplayer games. This is actually the Mandarin Chinese class from last semester, where we used Connect, and because we're going to be simulating something that I will show you in a little bit, to use a kiosk in an airport to find out where their hotel was. In this particular situation, which we taught Mandarin Chinese with an alternate reality game, they were told they were going to Beijing. They knew in advance they weren't, but people are so interested in playing and role-playing that they got into it. Even though they were in Beijing, they were still in the same classroom. You still see that across there to hang coats on. This is a customs inspector. They were told, first of all, they wouldn't be going for a long time, and then I mixed it up and said the other group that was going ahead of you couldn't go. The teacher said that. You're going to have to learn is what you're going to learn in 6 weeks in 2. And they did. Even knowing it was fake, right? This is but they're told, don't worry, there'll be this professor from this fictitious institute that was sponsoring this who will meet you at the airport. This is the airport. And we'll guide you through customs, get your currency exchanged, all that kind of thing. When they get there, there's nobody to meet them. There was just a sign on the ground, all crumpled up and stamped on, that said, "Welcome Rensselaer students." And that was it. So they had to clear customs by themselves, change their currency. Figuring out the Connect was no problem. They figured out where they found the hotel, the phone number. They called the phone number that, strangely enough, was not a Beijing area code. It was 518, which is upstate New York. Well, we can't do everything. And got the cab to come get them, and then figure out, I don't know if you can see any of the signs clearly. I think that's one of them there. There were signs all around the classroom in Chinese. And they were told to stand beneath the sign that said public transportation. They did this in the 4th week of class, all in Mandarin. The teacher said that she taught them an entire semester's introductory Mandarin in 8 weeks. And they had fun doing it. That was one of the mysterious characters that they met at first. Yeah?
Did they meet a Monday, Wednesday, Friday schedule?
No, they met every Thursday to play the game, and they met on Mondays for review with mentors. And built into the design of the game was also repetition. In the narrative, there were reasons why they needed to do it. So Thursdays was all within the narrative and the fiction. Mondays gave them a chance for review and practice with native speakers. This was done as a dress rehearsal for something I'm going to show you later. This would never work exactly like this for a class because it took 22 people to teach 12 Mandarin Chinese. And even if you can do it in 8 weeks, that's not a return on your investment that you really want. But it was done as a dress rehearsal to test if just being immersed in a narrative and games would help them learn faster, and it did. These are some of the case histories that are in the book. I can't go through all of these in the time I have, but just quickly read over and look at the change in numbers. This was in Louisiana. This was a school where 50% or more of the students are below the poverty line. They don't have computers. This is not, the multiplayer classroom can be taught in a country where there are no computers. I don't know if there actually is a country like that, but let's say out in the woods somewhere. It uses game design techniques, but it's not a video game. And Denisha used what she had in the room. This became a quest giver. So it didn't cost her any money to do that. Here's another one at Texas Tech. And notice that this is history. We had, what was she doing? Biology. Look at the yellow stuff in particular. That was a really good idea, helping them build their avatars, like putting fat loot on your avatar in a game. These guys are sensational, and I'm putting them up for that award that is every other year. It's a K through 12 award, begins with a P. Anybody know what that is? For outstanding teachers, it's funded by the government.
Presidential. Is that P as in presidential?
I don't know what it stands for exactly, but I just got a thing from them. I don't think so. But these guys are teaching a science class, I'm sorry, a math class, 7th grade, where they had regular students, disabled learning students, and English as a second language students. That's why there's 2 of them teaching this.
Where is that from?
Hawaii.
I think I'm one of the naive people in the audience, but could you give an example of what a knowledge quest in math might consist of?
Last math course I took, I got a D in it. But basically,
No, I'm just curious.
in the math class, no. I don't know exactly what they would do, but we build the quests. They were actually doing quests where they had to go and look for information and put it together. For example, find a concept, find some things to demonstrate it, I think, and so on, 7th grade. Okay. Say that? Yeah, I think so. But how do students who have experienced multiplayer classrooms do when they move on to more traditional teaching methods? Another question I got a lot. That's why I put these up here. Students learn the same material with more retention than in non-multiplayer classrooms. They did better. Class performance is ultimately measured in the same way. They get at the end of the class a letter grade, which they build up to through the XP. And they are carried over to traditional classes. I didn't just put these here. That's what the people were telling me. All right. Again, remember, I'm not a researcher. We're now putting together, finally, the grant proposal, which will allow us to do all the necessary work we need to do to make sure that all these things are actually happening and everywhere, and not just anecdotally. Students learn the same material with better retention. They will be highly competitive in any job market. That's the thing that they tested individually at the schools. And it doesn't cost anything more to do in a classroom. If teachers spent money, it was because they wanted to. They would buy extrinsic rewards as well as giving intrinsic rewards that come out of the multiplayer classroom. Now, I was, as you heard at the beginning, I was a writer-producer on Star Trek Next Generation. We had something there called the holodeck. And it looks something like this. I think it's interesting that this looks like it may almost work with motion tracking, right? And motion capture. I think it's very interesting. We're not there yet. We're not going to get there within the next several hundred years. Holodecks, But we can do something to start it. And forgive my fingers up there. I just got really excited. This was where I was 2 days ago. This is the Emergent Reality Lab being constructed at RPI. It is a 40 by 50 foot space that will be 3D virtual reality, 360, projected down also onto the floor. Eventually, we will raise the floor and project from underneath as well, and even probably not in my lifetime, but there's a researcher at RPI who is working with muscle tissue and creating synthetic muscle tissue that I want to put on the floor so that we can change the feel of the floor from gravel to sand. And I don't know if you've seen them, but they now have I don't know what they're called, universal treadmills, or the treadmills that you can walk in any direction on. The floor will do that someday. Not soon. Certainly not in September 2012, when this space will be finished and we will do our proof of concept. So I'm going to take the immersive qualities of the narrative and the gameplay, add them to the immersion of 3D and speakers all the way around, and smell-o-vision, if we have to test the immersive space. This is big enough to hold an entire class. It's not as big, I mean, the space is about, I guess, the size of this room, but the class is going to be in here because we have to rear project. And that will be ready in September 2012. We're very excited about this because it is, oh, by the way, this isn't free. This, it will have cost, I think it's cost us about $175,000 now, and we'll probably need another 30 to get a better level of projectors and everything. The better projectors you get, the throw isn't as long, so you can actually widen the space. And so over time, we hope to find projectors and technology that'll be not restricting the space as much as all. Yes?
Do you find this learning dynamic changes the proportion of women to men that participate in your classes?
What, this particular one?
No, I'm sorry, the multiplier classes.
No, because they don't have to be gamers. I'm just using game techniques to teach them. And they are collaboration. Women collaborate. Women are competitive. It's not, I mean, they have statistics on how many women play shooters as opposed to play, say, social network games. The majority of the players of social network games, 60% are women. It's not true of shooters. I don't play shooters either. So the only issue that I have is I had a lot more women at IU because even though there were game design classes, the subject matter came from a larger population. RPI being a tech school, the proportion of men to women is really, really rugged. And we're doing everything we can to expand the tent because we need, obviously, more women to be helping to design games. Right now, they get in through art. Men get in through programming, they get in through art, and we need to make that better. So anyway, that's the high end of that. Here's some final observations. Actively engaged classes, even students who are not gamers. Those students in Louisiana, very few of them are gamers. Also, I should say that teachers, not all those teachers were gamers, let alone game designers. None of them were game designers. But they went and asked the people around them, because I guarantee you, sitting in this room are people who know games better than you do. And if you're going to teach like this, yeah. If you're going to teach like this, look at the people around you who can help you. And then you build a lesson plan almost the same way you do now, but you do it with game design in mind. Higher average grade. There, I finally put that midterm up there. A, up from a C. Average grade in the class, B, up from a C. Almost perfect attendance. I give them XP for coming to class and they show up. Who would have thought? Students come early to class. The first time I spoke about this was at USC, and two teachers from a small community college in Texas came up to me. They said, we just needed something to get the students to come to class. We can't teach them if they don't come to class. And the students now come early because they're teaching it as a game. So far, somebody asked me, how about younger than middle school? Well, down around age 7 or 8 is when this all shifts and they don't get to play games in school anymore. And why do this for kindergarten? They're already doing this. I wouldn't mind trying a whole narrative, but I don't know about attention spans. It would be worth testing. But it is not needed there as much as it is in that demographic. Positive results continue after leaving the class, even if you go with traditional methods. That's it. I went through a whole bunch of stuff in a very short period of time, but I hope some of it was interesting. Thank you. And I'll take questions now, too. Got about officially 9 minutes, but I'm presuming you're over. Anybody have any questions? No? Yes, and then here.
Is it available as an ebook?
Yes. Yes, and it costs you less. And I get less for it.
My impression I got was that there's a continuum between games that are primarily within the computer reality, and then there's another world where we're playing games in real 3D, maybe like a card game. This card game, this card game. And my question to you is, in the research that looks at how simulation is an effective technique in teaching, is sort of equal to the lecture mode or other reading modes. However, when the students are engaged in creating the simulation, then they really learn. And what I got from you is that's what's happening. And you're looking at it from multiple places, but how much of it is...
Some of it they are designing as well. I got into trouble. I list in the book the fails as well as the successes. And I got into trouble in the one class that I did that was about character development in games, right? And so their avatars, we built... I wanted them to participate in the design as well as playing in the world that we were creating at the same time. Little tricky, because their avatars moved through a game map that they made, and they each had a guild, and they each had to protect an NPC. That's a non-player character that is, not in this case, computer controlled, it was Lee controlled. And messages came out about what they were supposed to do and so on from this dark tower in the distance. Sorry, Stephen King. And we got to this one point where I wanted to see what happened if I killed one of the NPCs from one of the guilds. Or at least they were going to die. I think it was a wolf. And how the other guilds would react and everything. But I sort of forgot that they were also the designers as well as the role-playing. So when I asked them, and in the role-playing mode, which is I didn't realize they were in, because I was asking a design question, they said, oh, let them die. You know, that's okay, our guild's okay, we're going to go forward and finish this. But I went, well, you're going to, really? And then we talked, I said, well, what about as designers? I said, well, who are we? Are we the players or the designers? We got into a big, really interesting discussion about the difference. And it actually worked out okay. It became a teaching moment, but it wasn't exactly what I had planned. You have to be very flexible in this. Any game that is designed for the real world, you can get rain. You can get buses crossing streets when you're on a sprint with the GPS and you're not looking where you're going. Luckily, we've never killed anybody. But it is, to a greater or lesser extent, they are helping with the design because that's what they're learning. I think it's probably lesser in the classes that are teaching other things, however. I wouldn't expect that they would be teaching design. If anything, the students would be teaching the teacher. Yes? And then you.
Okay, so you're at level 49 in Old Republic. What's the end game there? What are you looking forward to having expand out once you hit level 50? And the further question is, what is the end game in an education environment? What is the promise that opens up?
Well, I think, let me do that one first because it's more relevant. I think that the end game, think of each class that I'm teaching as a level, and as a matter of fact, I teach the same students now over and over again, so that each one is building towards that ultimate boss mob, which you have to defeat, which is getting a job. That's what we're doing. Or, yeah, and it's if you're getting a skill in math, if you're getting a skill in history, I don't know how many history jobs there are out there, but I'm sure there's still a few. That would be their ultimate challenge. And then once my students are able to create a portfolio of games, go into a game company, show the work they've done, and the game company says, we want you, then they've succeeded. And that's the end game. And then they can go off and play other games, because we're already getting into corporations now. People who want, I have an HR guy who has got safety stuff that people aren't paying attention to on the staff, and he wants to teach them how to do that and to keep them engaged. It seems like that would work. What I think we really need is a game design position in the cabinet. Because we've worked with economies all the time, and I think we could probably work something a little bit better out. Then the second question is, I have no idea because I'm playing it as a solo game. I've only grouped 3 times, and it's a multiplayer game because I was testing their story. Because I have a lot of friends at BioWare, and they were crowing about the story and everything. And so I'm at 49. I'm basically going to get to the end, and then I'm going to be seeing them. Actually, the executive producer is coming to talk at RPI. He's a friend, and I'm going to sit him down and say, Rich, I know it was Star Wars, but I didn't cry. I rarely laughed. You're still missing something here. I mean, Star Trek, we would have had them, tears rolling down their faces. Different franchise. In Star Wars, oh, it's an alien. Bow! In Star Trek, oh, it's an alien. I wonder if we can communicate with them. Oh my God, they're trying to eat us. I wonder if we can communicate with them. My God, there goes the ship. I wonder if we can communicate with them. It's like the idiot professor in The Thing who says, you're so much smarter than we are. And, well, yeah. That's how it worked out. So I don't know what the end game is. And we should call it Elder Game because there isn't really an end game in a multiplayer game, we hope. Okay, and there was, you were.
Can you give examples of how you used quests and the reward system as a means of understanding that they pertain or applications of these quests to the subject they're covering?
Yeah, one of the things that I learned was if I have to teach something to you, I have to learn it. They taught each other. So they did solo quests for smaller bits of material and guild quests for larger bits of material. And they were all really good on the stuff that they taught. And then on the others, they learned it, but they didn't learn it as well as they did the teaching. And they got graded for 2 things: clarity, which is rather important in teaching, and creativity. So that how did they present it? I mean, the guy that did the card tricks gets a really good grade in creativity. And so a number of XP is about the same. But I thought that was important that they also get some for that. So, and then something else weird happens, and that is that because peers are teaching them, they seem to think they know more than I do. Now, that's crazy, of course, but no, I get corrected by my students all the time. I forget, the year that Doom came out and stuff like that. Sorry. Jeez. But they're always, because it's, at least in my case, a subject matter that it's not a required course and it's an elective, although it is if they're in the game program. They are much more engaged because they want to be there to begin with. So that helps me, gives me a leg up, so I can test all these things. But the people that are out there teaching all these other courses, they're the test bed right now to see how this works. And it seems to be working pretty well. And that's how I did quests. They did them similar to what we talked about with the math stuff. A whole bunch of different ways to define quest. So it really depends, I think, on the subject matter. And I'm working on I'm consulting on a statistic game that they're creating at the University of Connecticut. And they're using statistics. There's I don't know how many major concepts there are, 26, 52, something like that. I have no idea. As I said, I'm terrible in math. And everybody hates statistics except the people who love it. And here's everybody, and here's the people who love it. And they identified very early on that the actual courses that the students hated were not preparing them to go out and actually use statistics and research or get a job or anything else. And so they're making it more intensive, but they've got a whole scenario which is a statistics company that's working for a pharmaceutical company who has a drug they've been testing, and the pharmaceutical company is in trouble, and something is wrong about the math and everything, and you start to explore the company, and to find out and explore the research. And the only way you can find out what is wrong is to learn these concepts of statistics as you go. Somebody who hasn't asked a question yet, and then we'll come back. Yes? Yeah.
First, I don't believe that you beat Skyrim because other XP points and just
No. One of the if we've learned one thing in MMOs as we design them is people don't like going backwards. And EverQuest, you could lose a level, you know, if you got killed too many times. Now you don't. The penalties are much easier. The games are much easier. Skyrim is an easy game. And Old Republic, I'm soloing the whole damn game. You know, and not only that, but I am taking numbers and kicking ass. I'm doing really good. And I'm doing that with one NPC companion. So I don't know that how, but games are so much easier than they used to be. Back here? Yes?
For someone who's never played a game and this is very unfamiliar to, where could I begin?
To play games?
Well, to move in this direction.
I'll read the book. Buy it new, not used. It makes a great Christmas gift.
Are you offering continuing education for people like that are working in the classroom? You talked about middle school through.
We have if that's what you're talking about, for the teachers? Yeah, we have a Facebook page that has about 280 people on it right now. And we've gone over the 20 countries that are exploring this. People come with ideas, they share the ideas. I wish there was more traffic back and forth, but I answer questions about it on there. And I have been known to go farther than that, to give people lecture notes and so on, although I don't really have any lecture notes anymore.
Why don't we take one more question and then we'll take them offline.
Oh, really? Oh, okay. All right.
What are the most effective intrinsic rewards?
For me, at least in this, I think is peer reward. There is satisfaction at doing something. You know, we have Fiero, which is the joy of victory. We had Schadenfreude, which is the joy of watching somebody else get into deep trouble. All those things are intrinsic rewards that are built into games, into good games. And that's what keeps people focused. You know, I worked for Zynga. It's really weird that they've taken all the fun out of an MMO and left all the crap. It's all just a treadmill, a leveling treadmill, and their business model is give us money and we'll make it easier for you. And I have seen their bell curves of profit, and when they launch a game on Facebook, it goes like this, and then it goes like that. But they keep launching them, so they keep making all this money, and they make savvy purchases. What's the company they just bought the game?
The game is Draw Something.
Yeah, Draw Something. It was Draw Something. And they already had a built-in audience. So they've got billions lying around. So here, you want a billion? We want wanted to call your game a Zynga game, which is better than they used to do, which is copy other people's games and then make a lot of money on them, which was bad. Okay, sorry.
I think you're willing to stay and talk to folks a little bit.
Yes, I'd be happy to.
So if you'd like to know about the last two talks here at Atlas, just grab one of these as you leave. But please join me in thanking Lee one more time.
And thank you. Good questions.
Let people escape who.
Sure. No, none of them can go. This is an est.